thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, everybody. I know for everyone involved in music education, this has been an absolutely crazy, hectic week, and we're really grateful for you taking the time out and joining in this chat. I'm calling it a chat because our plan is to keep it informal, to make it a space where we can share ideas, share problems, share challenges in a safe space, and talk about how we're all collectively going to come up with solutions for some of the challenges we're facing at the moment. My name's Emily Penn. I work for NIMAS. We are a youth music charity based up in North Yorkshire. We're a strategic partner of Youth Music, founder member of the Alliance for Musically Inclusive England. We do lots of youth music development activities in North Yorkshire, but we've also hubs and other arts organisations all across the country to look at how online provision, online services, online interventions can help better develop access to musical activities provided by music hubs and their partners. So we've been working with hubs on we've worked with them on quite a sort of one-to-one, slow-paced sort of basis to look at how can we really help to integrate online music education within the overall provision of what music education services do, not seeing it as the answer, not seeing it as a replacement, seeing it as a really useful element that can add to what we do. And what we have tended to say to music hubs is take it slowly, do a little bit at a time, don't bite everything off at once. And obviously what you've all been facing this week is having to think about how you get everything online all of a sudden so you can continue the provision to your young people and so that you can keep people in jobs over the next however long that we have to all be delivering stuff from our houses. So that message is a little bit different, but I think what we'd still say is don't try and do everything at once. Don't try and replicate everything that you would normally do face-to-face online. There are ways of breaking it up. There are ways of chunking it down that might help you. So the purpose of today really is to share some of our learning from NIMAS, share some of the learning from some of the music hubs across the country that have been doing this for some time, have been looking at how to integrate online learning into their work so they can share what they found with you. We've also got Jonathan Savage from You Can Play to talk a little bit about the technology and hardware side, connections, to talk a little sort of the overarching sort of business development side of integrating online into your work. So we'll all talk a little bit about what we've learned, what we've found, and then there'll be a lot of time for you all to ask questions, give us your experiences, tell us what support you need, and just have a collective chat about your sort of experiences and what you're trying to do and the challenges you're facing as well. So I'm very, very happy to welcome Julia Yent and Ross Wilson from Cambridgeshire Music Service, John Stevens from Surrey Music Service. I think we're also expecting Jim from Surrey. I'm not sure if he's...
He'll probably be here soon. We also, amongst participants, we have Alex from Surrey. I've noticed he's here. Hi,
Brilliant.
Alex. Again. Alex Bondono.
Hi, Alex. Oh, yeah. Hi, Alex. I can see you. And we have Jonathan from You Can Play and Jen from Sound Connections as well. So I'll just hand over to them to introduce themselves first, and we'll hear from both of the hubs in turn about their experiences, have a little bit of an intro from You Can Play and Sound Connections, and then we'll go to questions. So Julia and Ross, I'll hand over to you guys just to introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Julia Yent. I'm Head of Business Development for Cambridgeshire Music, which is the hub for Cambridgeshire.
Ross Wilson, so I'm the Music Development Manager at Cambridgeshire Music, mostly dealing with contemporary and technology.
Thanks, Ross. And John and Jim, I think you're in here as well from Surrey.
Yeah, so I'm John Stevens. I'm from, I'm a one of the senior management team at Surrey. We're actually Surrey Arts, part of the local authority. We are actually an arts service, but we are also the lead partner for Surrey Music Education Hub.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. Yeah,
Oh, he's here.
I'm
He's
here.
all
I was
right.
here before. The host was not allowing me in apparently with my camera or something. Anyway, I work with John. I have a role around inclusion and participation for Surrey Music.
Thank you. And I think we've got Jennifer from Sound Connections still here.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jen Raven and I'm the Deputy Director of Sound Connections, and we support anyone working with young people through music. Like NIMAS, we're one of Youth Music's strategic partners and a founder member of the Alliance for a Musically Inclusive England.
Thank you. And Jonathan.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jonathan Savage. I'm the Managing Director of You Can Play. We're a not-for-profit sales consultancy business working in music education, and we've been the technical partner with NIMAS on the Connect Resound project since its start in 2011.
Thanks, Jonathan. So I think the best place to start, really, I know that you will all have been coming up with lots of ideas, questions and solutions for how are you going to continue to deliver some of your services to your young people in your areas. Some of you may have been doing a little bit of online learning already. You might have dipped your toe in, you might have been doing a lot, or it might be brand new to some of you. So I'd like to hand over to colleagues about their experience and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing down there in Cambridgeshire in the past couple of years.
Thank you, Emily. What a week it's been. We've kind of come up with a vision for this moment, which is that we want to keep making music, keep children safe, and stay in business. And I think that probably sums it up for a lot of the people that are on this call. We're working our way to providing a high quality solution to online learning in general, but particularly now the current problem of children needing education and entertainment from home. Just to tell you a little bit about what we'd had already been doing, the timing was kind of bizarre actually, because we've been running a pilot for what I believe is called synchronous online learning, so a tuition via live video, since the autumn, and literally the pilot ended 2 weeks ago and we're going to get the evaluation report on Monday. So that put us in a really interesting position to actually go faster than we had planned. So our plans were to take a year to get our full staff team of 50 tutors up to speed, and yeah, we're doing it in a week. So that's interesting. But I think what's really encouraging is how much enthusiasm there is coming back from parents and coming back from staff. So I just thought I'd read this one little quote for you. This is from a parent. So, we started communicating as the schools shut, saying, we're hoping to be able to bring this to you. And we got this back pretty well straight away. I am really happy to hear that my daughter will manage to continue to get her piano lessons, even if it will be online and not in person. I was already quite sad at the idea of a long break in her learning, but thanks to your quick adjustment to new technologies, that might not be the case. So thank you for setting this up. And that's just one of many emails that we've received and we've been sharing with our staff, which certainly really helped them to get on board. So I'm sure that we'll have a chance to tell you in more detail later, but we do feel that we're in a position now where we have strong safeguarding and GDPR protocols around what we're doing. We've worked really closely with the county councils, Leeds for those things, because Cambridge Music is part of a county council. So we're just really happy to be have this opportunity to share our learning and help music teachers and hubs across the country in this moment. So just to put a bit of detail on what we've been doing, we've had 5 teachers delivering across a range of instruments to about 20 students. So we've had given each of them 6 lessons, and as Emily was saying, we with her guidance, we have been quite focused on what we've done. So we've been doing the online tuition, and we've also been doing live broadcasts of interactive educational concerts. So we've got about just over a year's experience under our belts of that. and a portfolio of really great content from professional ensembles ranging from King's College Chapel Choir to the Brass Funkies. So this week, at very short notice, but it's been amazing how people have been up for it. We've been training all 50 of our tutors in how to give online tuition via live video. And we're also developing an online version, a sort of recorded version that people can listen to of these live broadcasts that we've done. Just another little quote to throw in from one of our tutors, who I have to say didn't think would be first in line with enthusiasm, and confidence, but it just shows you how it's really great that she's written in. Thank you so much for doing that demo on Zoom. It's so helpful. I am very grateful. I am learning something new every day. So, all credit to, I just think everybody is really pulling together to try and make this work. We're also assessing how we can take curriculum support, arts ensembles and arts therapies online. So, we're also looking forward as well and seeing what else we can do and learning from everybody else. So that's my little introduction. I'll hand over to Ross to tell you a little bit more about how we're doing things.
Yeah, so just going into a little bit more detail quickly, and really show about the delivery side of what we've been doing here as well. So it's been a very tricky week for us. Like we said, we were planning to train, I think it was about 30 staff by September. And yeah, we got turned around and said, no, all 50 have to be trained by Friday. Which is a challenge in itself, but trying to look at how it's overwhelming. So very much what we've said to everybody is it's not going to be perfect. And I think that's an important thing to run through everybody's heads at this moment. This is a very unique situation. Clients are going to be understanding as well that they're not expecting what's going to come across to you as delivery to be perfect. It's just continuity at this point, and like we say, being able to get something in the household. So that straight away has helped a lot of staff, and we've basically put in place a system where we've encouraged a lot of independent learning and development with the staff. But one of the biggest challenges we've always had as a service is, and probably most like many other hubs, is most of us work very remotely. So we quite often don't see our staff throughout the year. What we've done is we've implemented all of our Connect teachers who have been doing the pilot with us as Connect champions. We've put each one of those in one of our line manager teams to support a line manager, and we've set up instant messaging groups. So what we've seen this week is not much coming into our Outlooks account, which is really nice because I hate to log on and see about 30 emails in my inbox. Instead, everybody's been using the instant messaging and actually helping each other out. So we're very much trying to encourage this culture of just reflecting upon each issue as it comes every day, trying to come up with solutions. And it's been great. It's been great to see staff that we wouldn't normally engage with this kind of style as well. Like the one who's come in with the feedback. So it's really great to see everybody's taking this on board and is eager to get delivery. So alongside all of that one, what we're basically putting out there for delivery, or we've been focusing on, is one-to-one teaching mostly. In our pilot, we did a lot of one-to-one remote learning. Luckily, during our pilot phase, we found one of our big issues was travel, and our teachers actually couldn't travel to our Huntingdon base or a studio that we may have set up in another area. So what we actually put in place, which we're really grateful we did at the time, is a studio-based learning. So we've put together all the risk assessments, and we're looking at how teachers can deliver from their own home studio. So like the space I'm in now, using this setup, directly into the student's house, which has solved a lot of issues. And obviously in this kind of situation, this is going to be the best way to go about it, where we can stay in our teaching space and just link in directly to the other side. So we've been running 30-minute sessions at the minute, but we're looking at just continuing all of our current delivery that our staff are doing and just migrating it online using the service for the moment. It is also possible to do small groups in this way as well. We're using Zoom. You've got the gallery function, you've got the chat function to share resources. So if you do have a group of just 2 students, 2 or 3, it is possible to have them all on at the same time. And we found as long as you have the parents in the room, the behavior management side has been, if not better, than you would have all three of the students together in a school. So there's a lot of creative ways to get around this. I myself have taught from, I think the youngest I've done so far is 5 years old, taught across this platform. And that's on piano and guitar, and then gone all the way up to 18. So you do have to adapt your delivery, but this is just pulling us back down to it's not going to be perfect. Alongside that, we have been doing our broadcasts as well. So we had a bit of a crisis point in that March is our live music month, where we organised all these many lovely concerts for us. We ran one at the Junction. We had 6 schools, I think, due to attend. Went there on the Thursday night, sound checked, and that was the night we had the first government announcement. All the schools got scared and basically cancelled. So we came in Friday morning with no audience for the artists. So instead, we knew we had this system. We set up a couple of cameras, and we live streamed directly into the classrooms of all of the students instead. And it actually worked really well. We used the chat function. The artists were amazing. Even though they were playing to just an empty audience, they were amazing at actually encouraging people in the classrooms to give suggestions of stuff to put into the songs, give suggestions of dance moves over the chat. And it was fantastic to actually even hear it over the headphones in the feed. We could hear the classrooms interacting, singing along and cheering. Yes, there is a slight time delay, but when you're just trying to get students engaged and actually fun and being part of the arts, it's not too big an issue. So these are kind of our 2 approaches that we're pushing forward with at the minute to help us during this crisis period with the continuity. I'm just going to throw back to Julia now, just to take you in depth a little bit more with the safeguarding there.
So Emily, this is over to you. Would you like me to go into more depth with it now, or would you like me to? Would you like to stop at that point?
I'm very happy for you to go into the safeguarding now, Julia, and give the holistic picture of what Cambridgeshire are doing. Thank you.
Certainly. Okay. So we took NYMAS's guidance as our starting point for approaching this. And I think there was 2 essential principles that we were looking to. One is directly from the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance, Department for Education guidance, which says it's essential that children are safeguarded from potentially harmful and inappropriate online material. So we've done a lot of work into ensuring that we're doing that. But also the other side of the coin is that live video learning can actually be beneficial for children's education. It can help them to improve their online security and skills to navigate the online world. So if you do something well like this, then it's actually very educational for the students in itself to interact with you that way. So there's sort of key ingredients that I would say that we're using to achieve these safeguarding standards. And one of them was already mentioned, which is that we ensure that we do a risk assessment of every home studio, tutor home studio. So we have a checklist, and a manager beams into the studio. And for example, one of the things they're looking at is, are there any inappropriate personal items in view? So yeah, last week I think it was Ross, I beamed into Ross's studio and did the risk assessment, and he's done the same for me. And at the same time, you can do helpful things like hopefully there's enough light on my face today, because I remember when we did the risk assessment, there definitely wasn't, was there?
It's adjusting, it's not just the safeguarding, it's also the quality side of what's on screen as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it won't be any surprise to anybody to my next point, which is to obtain consent. And we've looked to how we can do that in the most smooth way. So we've actually developed an online form so that parents and carers can go online to give their consent, confirm that they've read the policy that we have published. So anybody can go onto the Cambridgeshire Music website and have a look at our policy. That might be really handy for people. And ensuring that, some of the basics, ensuring that our tutors only ever use the parent-carer email to communicate with the student, even if they're given student details, they absolutely should not use that and should dissuade parents from doing that. Again, another piece of guidance we got from NIMAS when we were choosing the platform is one that encrypts data. So, Zoom really ticks the boxes in lots of ways on the safeguarding side as well as the technology side. The other thing that we've been working out is how to provide that observation function in a different way, both for the tutor's protection and the student's protection. So we're doing this in two ways, which is that we have actually, we've locked down the settings at admin level for all of our tutors so that all of the lessons are recorded. And it's causing us an interesting situation because we're just about to go back to Zoom and say, can we have more capacity for more recordings, please? But we just feel that this takes any of the pressure off our students, that they know, off our tutors, I mean, that they know that there is a recording in place which is accessible to management. But the other way that we're supporting our tutors is that we ask parents to confirm that the lesson will be visible to them. So it's fine to be in the next room with an open door. During the pilot, actually we've had feedback that parents absolutely adore being able to cook dinner whilst the lesson's going on, rather than sitting in a cold car on the road outside a house. But it also has a safeguarding purpose as well. We also make parents and carers agree that they won't take their own recording in any way. They can't stand there with a camera. We are looking into whether we can make the fact that we record lessons actually part of the offer. We haven't worked out how we'll be doing that yet, but that's actually quite an interesting additional added value that we could be looking into. And then I just think that the last thing is that you have to keep other children age under 18 out of sight of the camera, because you only have permission to record that specific child, and ensuring everybody is appropriately dressed. It's kind of obvious, but it's there in our policy and in our consent.
Thank you, Julia, very much. We've got a few questions coming in about the GDPR and video calls in particular, that it's probably actually worth picking up now rather than in a overall Q&A at the end. I've got a question. How have you been able to, or have you been able to adjust your GDPR policy to cover recording video calls with young people and storing for teaching and monitoring purposes? I think that's sort of what you've been covering, but I don't know if there's any more detail you have on that at all.
Yeah,
I know you spoke to your...
we have set up a separate policy which builds on the GDPR policy. So the permissions in our GDPR policy are, some of them come through to the blending learning, but also those extra consent that you need. So we set up a separate policy.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you both. It's so useful to hear the sort of practical realities of delivering a blended learning and then 100% online learning offer on the ground. And I think that important point of continuity rather than perfection is really important for us all to bear in mind here. Obviously, there are baselines that we all need to have in place. And, the very first baseline of those is the safeguarding and the GDPR and all of those kinds of things. But I think on top of that, there's real flexibility possible to be built into an offer. And it's really great to hear how you're finding that. I've got one other question before we move on to Surrey, which is using Zoom. One question I've been sort of just pondering over the last couple of days about platforms really is that with Zoom, obviously you happening. So as you've suddenly had a lot more pupils and a lot more teachers, how's the timetabling worked for you guys?
Who's that a question for, Emily?
Either for you or Ross. How have you managed sort of who has the Zoom at any given time?
What, for the accounts side?
Yeah, in terms of actually delivering the lessons.
Yeah,
has that been a challenge?
So, well, not particularly. I mean, we're rolling out with the aim teachers start doing their delivery next week, but certainly with the pilot project, what we basically did was we brought a set amount of licenses for the organization or enterprise. So like, I can't remember, it gave us a certain amount of licenses, and basically we went back to Zoom and said, yeah, we need to expand this out to our whole staff, and they made a deal with us to give us the correct amount of licenses. So every tutor has their own Zoom account that's connected to their work email, just to help with that safeguarding function as well. So as far as timetabling, we've done the training side, and we've basically thrown it into the tutor's hands now. Consent forms have been sent out to the parents. Once the consent form comes back, the procedure is that the business team then inform, and it goes through our online system, and the timetable is entirely in the tutor's hands. We know not every lesson is going to be picked up, but like we're saying at the minute, it's about getting what we can and as much as continuity as we can. And this is what we've fed back to the staff, and we've advised them to start with their current timetable they have at the minute, and then try and be as flexible as possible from there.
Great.
I'll throw in one other thing there, actually, which is that there's flexibility all round. So, you know, we recognise that this is a new service, but also it's a really unique moment. And we have relaxed our terms and conditions. Well, we've not all of them, but the element that we've relaxed is that we're not charging. So if a parent or the pupil or the tutor isn't able to deliver for reasons of illness or technology, whatever it might be, we're not charging for that lesson, and that will just roll on, and that just takes the pressure off people, you know, and gives them reassurance to try this with us.
Because a lot about this is making sure your staff are comfortable as well. There's going to be a lot of staff in the service that have fears around technology or don't particularly want to dive head on into this delivery. So it's relaxing all those fears as much as possible.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know it's kind of how the private online sector has managed it as well. I think you've got to, you do need to think a bit differently about cancellations and things, and have a specific one for online. Thank you both so much. I'm going to hand over to John and Jim now to give the perspective from Surrey, just so that we can have two different hubs perspectives, and then we will hear from Jonathan and Jen after that, and then open it up to questions. So we will be hauling you back in there to answer some questions, but thank you so much. That was incredibly useful and informative. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
John
Thanks, Emily. Can
Surrey,
you hear me okay?
And I think Jim's in here somewhere.
Yeah, so Jim's here as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what we're doing, and then Jim will follow up with his comments and a little bit further depth on various aspects, particularly possibly around the technology and stuff like that, and also his own area of interest, which more of in a moment. So first of all, I would say that there is a lot of crossover between what we're doing in Surrey and what we've found, and what Julia and Ross have just been saying. I was hearing a lot of things processes and thought processes that we've gone through that are very similar. There's a few differences which I'll try and pick out. But anyway, I want to give you a bit of context about Surrey first, because the main thing is that we're a large music hub. We have 400 schools, and Surrey Arts is the music service is called. We are an music and arts service, and the music service part of us. We have up to 250 staff delivering, and we're 6,000 lessons a week in schools and in music centres after school settings. So plus other, the usual kind of music hub activities and opportunities for young people. And also we have a very significant programme of work targeting marginalised young people, hard to reach, young people with SEND and so on and so forth. And it's been very important to us in these discussions that group are very much a part of whatever we roll out, and that we will be ensuring that they receive as good opportunities as our mainstream offer as well. Our experience with online delivery came really through the previous NIMAS program. So thanks to Emily for that. And in sort of late 2018, 2019, where we ran some small pilot programs. You know, there's a lot of learning. I would say, interestingly, that at that time, we found quite a lot of obstacles really to rolling that out, both from parents who weren't particularly interested and staff. They weren't disinterested, and we managed to get some of them on board, but there was a kind of obstacles, I would say, many of which you won't be surprised to know have evaporated in the last 2 weeks, and everybody is really keen to get on board. Parents, we're getting loads of messages from parents asking us if we're going to be able to do something online, and lots of our staff are really, really fired up and interested in getting involved. So the big challenge for us is the scale and how we might scale up a very small pilot to a wider group. Also, I think it's a very significant step change for us to consider going from what I would say is essentially home to home. So we didn't have any previous provision around the studio, the studio idea that Ross and Julia talked about. And previously we had felt the safeguarding issues, you know, we hadn't addressed those. We'd tried to run from our own offices and things like that. So going home to home from a safeguarding point of view is a step change, but it's also a huge opportunity if we can get it right, if we can get it safe and we can get it good. It's very exciting potentially. Yeah, and like Cambridgeshire, at the moment our offer is going to be all about one-to-one, and we're looking at phase 2 for the group because there's obviously potential there. So the way we've approached this, we started literally, 10 days ago. We felt that we needed to pull together documentation that we can share with all the stakeholders, really, the protocols around what we're doing, information and guidance. So we started with safeguarding, and we drafted a safeguarding document. I would say very, very similar to considerations to Cambridgeshire. So we have gone down the route with Zoom that we are recording every lesson. We have said specifically that we are going to hold that recording for 2 years. And we're in discussions with Zoom about how the digital storage of that will take place and the GDPR implications that are very important. We are within a county council, so everything we do has to be up to the standards of the council's GDPR. So you can imagine that we're in conversations about how that will look. We will be, to cut costs in the long term, we will be trying to find a model whereby we download the video data and store it, hopefully within the county council's storage systems. So we got the safeguarding document. We've got technical documents, which will be targeted for staff, for teachers, and one for parents. We're in the process of developing a teaching and learning document, more of which I suspect we'll talk about later. So we have a trial group which we are training up as I speak. Myself, Jim and Alex just come out of a training meeting this morning with about 12, 15 colleagues. We've got another one on Monday. We're looking to train up 20 to 30 colleagues, I think, in the short term. And we're looking to get lessons going out as soon as we can. We did some lessons last weekend, just a sort of pre-trial trial, and we'll be rolling out lessons, and we hope to have a group, as I say, of staff around 20, 25, working with about 5 pupils each, within a couple of weeks. We're going to offer provision during the holidays where staff are willing, and they are willing on the whole to get involved because the demand is clearly there. So we've targeted our kind of senior team leaders for the initial training, and because we've got such a wide group that we'll need to cascade down to, we're hoping that they will take on the responsibility for mentoring and training their own teams with our support. A big consideration for us is the administration side of it. I was interested to note that in Cambridgeshire colleagues, you are asking the tutors themselves to manage their timetables. Because of the way we work, we are actually going to try and go down a central administration of the lessons, which, you know, we'll see. You know, that it's a big challenge for us, but that's the way we're going at the moment. Just to add a couple of things. Yeah, parallel to this, we are developing, as you guys are, you know, we're looking at things like streaming live music. We're looking at supporting online resources, things like Charanga, VIP, making those sorts of things available to parents, musical futures, and so on and so forth. And we're also looking at what we can do with schools who are open with more vulnerable pupils and high you know, NHS staff and so on and so forth. So we're looking at how we can work with them. We're looking at how we can work with special schools. We work with special schools a lot, and that kind of provision. And we will also be thinking about our looked after children and our programs with, for example, unaccompanied asylum seekers and those kinds of groups in parallel with the mainstream offer. And that's the area that Jim leads on. He may want to talk a bit about that in a moment. So, but that's all very important to us. I think that's probably about it from me. Just to say, I totally endorse what Ross said. Everything we are saying, it's not perfect. This is work in progress. So that that message is going to our staff, and it's also going to parents in our communications with parents. And I have to say, we started by asking tutors to identify parents who will be comfortable with that. We're asking staff to choose the families they work with, the children they work with, in the first instance, because we need to try it out, and we need parents who can understand that's where we are with it. So I think that's me. Jim, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, happy to. I realised that we are, I'd say, 10 minutes over from the original schedule. Yeah, so
that's up to you, Emily.
Shall I be quick or shall I not speak? What do you want to do, Emily? I think your microphone is off.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, we've still got about 50 minutes. I think carry on, and we will. I know Jen said that she was going to sort of scoop up some of her learning and can probably contract her section a little bit. And anything we miss, we will catch up in the comments either during or after. So crack on. Yeah, it'd be good to hear from you. Okay,
I'll make this quick because so much was covered by Ross and Julia, and now by John. Like you guys, we originally did a pilot with NIMAS funding, and that was really looking at using this kind of approach to provide access for music for those young people who were experiencing barriers. So we worked with unaccompanied asylum seekers, looked after children, and some young people with learning disabilities, and it was really successful, and is now really helping this current sort of urgency that we find. In the first pilot, what we found is by really harnessing this approach and using online learning, Zoom or other platforms at that time, we were able to, I mean, Surrey is a really big area. It's a big geographical area. and we have a workforce gap when we are providing diverse programs. For example, with some of those unaccompanied minors and young refugees, we needed to find Arabic-speaking, Farsi-speaking musicians, and actually that's really hard to come by. Sorry, but not so hard to come by outside of Surrey. So this technology allowed us to sort of quite quickly diversify our workforce, and not just that, also sort of music diversity within our offer. So we started to use Zoom screen sharing capabilities, and this is host disabled attendee to screen share. So I can't show you. Maybe that's for another day, but yeah, we're able to bring in tutors from outside Surrey, as well as the few that we have within Surrey, to provide music production, beat making, that kind of music offer. So you can connect your iPad really easily through the screen share, with or without a cable. We've been using Soundtrap, which is in the cloud technology. It's like a music production software in the cloud. So both music tutor and student can log on to the same session, to the same music project, and be working simultaneously. So already in our pilot, we'd seen that this had really opened up a lot of possibilities. We also saw that some of our young people with on the autistic spectrum engaged really well through this process, was something we weren't necessarily expecting. Sort of bringing it right forward to where we are now. We've done a little bit more piloting over the weekend, and some of the feedback, and we've spoken a lot about the policies and the safeguarding and data and all those kind of systems and policies, which is really important. But just to make the point for those, what's come through really strong is those children, and these are what we've done so far is with quite vulnerable children, are at home, and those children, as music teachers, we form really strong bonds with these young people, and we are educators, but we're also something a little bit more holistic, and we know that schools provide this really safe place and stability for young people. And what came through really strongly this weekend was how powerful and how stabilizing it was to have 30 minutes of music tuition from a music tutor who those young people know and trust and have built a relationship over the years. So I think within this climate, with everything that's going on, there's a really important kind of personal, social reason to push forward in this. Just looking at some notes that might not have been covered. Just to say, there's a lot of talk about Zoom. There are obviously other platforms, but like my colleagues here, I think we've come back to Zoom because of the functionality, because we can record the sessions. We've also found that within schools, the firewall is so high, so strong. The settings are so safe and so high on those firewalls that things like Google, I can't remember the platform now, the Google Suite, Google Hangout, Skype, FaceTime, all of those things, they actually couldn't get through. We couldn't use them. That was part of our reason for going to Zoom. But I think we found all this additional functionality, the ability to look at other music genres through Zoom, have really made it a bit of a no-brainer for us. There was a question around using cameras and software and microphones. So we've done a bit of work on this as well, looking at the importance of cameras, separate cameras, your inbuilt camera, all that stuff, and headphones and microphones. So we can share that if that's of use. I mean, in a nutshell, and I'll probably stop speaking now because there's so much to say about it, but a lot has already been said. We've found that in a nutshell, headphones are really important to use. Ideally, smaller headphones than this. They're huge. This isn't great for a violin, probably. having a second camera can be really useful if you want to zoom in on a finger position, etc. And yeah, I mean, interactive tools. Yeah, we've put together a technical guidance. John mentioned this before, one for tutors and one for young people and their parents and carers. So that might be useful. We could share that as that's of use, and that really delves into how to get set up, tips and tricks, typical problems, bandwidth, all that technical stuff. So I think I'll probably stop there, Emily, and hopefully that was of use.
It was hugely useful, Jim, and we've got lots of people saying yes, please do share those guidelines. That would be really helpful as well. I think what's coming through loud and clear from all of you is the real benefits under any normal circumstances of integrating online delivery into your offer. Just some of those things that I hear from hubs all the time about diversifying your workforce, about being able to get different tutors, different genres, different sort of masterclasses and things like that in there, being able to broaden access to live music experiences as well. And something else that comes up again and again is that focus, concentration and behaviour management that you've all mentioned, that actually a lot of teachers are pleasantly surprised by when they start delivering online. And just the comfort and familiarity that young people have with talking to people via a screen. I mean, my son this week, I was asking him, you know, do you prefer being at school? Do you prefer being at home? Oh, at home, because I can see my friends more. You know, he hasn't noticed they're on a screen. They are not fazed by speaking to each other like this as we might be. And that talk on platforms is really helpful as well. And I think there's always sort of developments in platforms, and it's always worth us kind of revisiting it and coming back to what functionality we need. But sharing information on what sort of platforms we're finding useful is very helpful. And I know a lot of people are finding Zoom helpful at the moment, as well as musictutors.co.uk or sort of have got an offer as well. So there's different platforms that people are finding particularly helpful. There was a lot of talk there about technology and a lot of questions about the sort of the ideal technological setup. I think it comes back to in the current circumstances, we're hearing a lot, you know, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good, and kind of start with what's available to you, and that gives you a lot of kind of insight as to what might be helpful as a next step. Just to say, we have got Jonathan Savage from You Can Play delivering a Facebook Live session on this, where we will be sort of answering a lot more in-depth questions about sort of ideal hardware setups. But Jonathan, I don't know if you want to hop on now and just give a little bit of your perspective about, you know, kind of where to start and the sort of key considerations. I think I echo what Jim said about headphones being a sort of key thing. Jonathan, are you around?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, hi. Great. Hi, everyone. Right, so the Connect Resound project, over the years, we've explored a range of different technologies. I mean, originally it did start as a research project, and the aims of the research with the University of Hull were to explore what some of the ideal technological solutions might be for this type of tuition, and I mean, in particular, the use of multi-camera systems using video mixers and streamers and various other bits of kit. And all of that work has been written up, and the research report is in the resources for Connect Resound, etc. But I think, you know, we're at a situation where we need to develop things quickly, and I would absolutely subscribe to what Emily just said about using what you've got. It's not about buying new equipment at this point. It's about making use of the existing technologies and going with that. We're all managing to communicate very well with our webcams this afternoon, and obviously that's I guess is what most people are using for their online lessons at the moment. I think having the options of additional cameras is a really good thing to think about, but it's not easy, and I'd be very interested to hear about how people have managed to do that within their current systems as well. But clearly, as musicians, and sound is of the preeminent importance, I would suggest. So getting a really nice quality audio sorted, I think is probably a really important priority in all of this. And, you know, if you can look at the opportunities around bringing in an external, better quality microphone into your setup, I think that would be something that would enhance the experience from the student perspective considerably. So I think, you know, within the Connect Resound project up to this point, we've explored a lot of those options. And multi-camera systems and better quality audio are two of the key things that we have done a lot of work on with our partners. Happy to kind of give more detail about that if people are interested. The little bit of work I've been doing for Emily this week is going to form the basis of the Facebook talk next week, or Facebook presentation next week. I think, you know, we've heard a lot about the different platforms within which online learning takes place. And, you know, within the project up to this point, we've used a number of these, Skype and Google Hangouts, and as we're hearing, a lot of people are liking the functionality of Zoom. And, you know, I'm really pleased to hear about the safeguarding approach that Cambridgeshire and Surrey have outlined in terms of making sure that the software environments are fit for purpose and meeting their GDPR kind of requirements. I think that's excellent news. In terms of looking ahead a little bit, I think there's a really important question. Although I absolutely agree with the people that have said don't let the perfection be the enemy of the good, I think what's going to happen over the next few months is this is going to become a very crowded marketplace indeed, of private providers offering music education and instrumental learning, and as well as music education hubs and music services, of course. And I think it's worth us thinking a little bit about what does really good quality look and sound like in this arena. And whilst I think, yes, it's important now to get things going, I think within a few months, if this carries on, this situation carries on over a period of 6 to 9 months, which I think is quite likely, although of course no one knows, then how are you going to make your provision stand out from the vast majority of other opportunities that are being made available? And I wonder whether there might be some mileage in us, maybe in the next few weeks, thinking a bit about how we build on that basic one-to-one model that we're also familiar with, and look at using some of these technologies to think beyond that and look maybe at how a one-to-many type model for the delivery of instrumental music lessons could be facilitated. So just to be clear, I don't think it's about a one-to-many approach replacing a one-to-one approach, but it's a way in which those two different ways of thinking about how online education is delivered could exist side by side. So I was really excited to hear a bit about how you guys in Cambridgeshire are using online some of the pre-recorded content that you've got from your performances and from your archives, if you like, of live events, and how that can be made available to students alongside their one-to-one provision. And I think that might be one of the ways in which really high quality online music provision is differentiated moving forwards. So I can talk a little bit more about that if that's of interest, but I mean, clearly there are technologies available that can help you produce good quality content, which could be shared in that way. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with, you know, the various functionalities of you know, iMovie and all of those sorts of tools which can help you produce that online content quickly and to a good standard. I think a second key thing here in relation to looking forwards is that whole issue of production value and making sure that we think through the practical consequences of the environment within which the lessons are taking place. And I would echo Ross's comments about the lighting of the space. I think that's really important. The positioning of the cameras, the quality of the audio, all of these sorts of things are things that there is knowledge and understanding from the world of broadcasting that we can apply into these situations. And yes, we're not professional broadcasters. I absolutely get that, but there are some simple things that we can make sure we get right to give a better, or give the very best quality of experience to our students who are receiving these lessons. And I think at the end of the day, you know, we've got our core concern right now is engaging and keeping engaged our students, the student bases that you've built up over the years. And I think it's brilliant, some of the stories that we've heard about. But if you're managing a music service or a music education hub at the moment, do try and spend a little bit of time thinking, well, in 6 months' time, how am I going to be able to differentiate my services provision? What's going to make it stand out? What does really good quality provision in this arena look like? And try and build towards that. And I think it's going to involve us, as I've said, thinking beyond just the one-to-one. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that and how technology can support that as well. So I've got quite a lot more that I could say, but I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to leave it now, and I'll try and respond to any questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Again, hugely helpful. And just to say, yes, we're going to follow up after today. Jonathan's very kindly producing a resource on some of the technology that we think will be helpful for people to look at, and we'll also be having a more in-depth Facebook Live discussion next week about that, and all the details about that are on our website, and I think my colleague Grace can probably pop them up in the chat as well. And I think that's a really good point about it's not going to be that easy for everybody necessarily to replicate their face-to-face weekly delivery online straight away. As we've heard, there's a lot of things that you need to get set up. Quite a lot of hubs have done amazing work over the last week in getting this all ready and getting it started. And everybody's been doing it in different ways, and just thinking about those other resources that aren't necessarily in real time, those asynchronous resources, using your teachers as the experts to actually just create really good quality content that you can share with pupils in other ways, not necessarily in real time, is a really good part of the overall offer, and something to continue to think about, because that is what differentiates, as Jonathan said, a music service and a music hub from other providers. It's that link, it's that connection to that quality, it's the connection to ensembles, and we've heard some exciting ways about how people are still managing to get their pupils to connect with one another as well, which is great. So we've heard quite a lot about the huge benefits of online learning, and some of the real sort of practical steps people have taken to embed it very, very quickly, as well as some of the sort of challenges and the differences to face-to-face lessons. And as you all probably know, we've got quite a lot of guidance for teachers as well. We had a Facebook Live session just for teachers last week, which is up on the NIMAS Facebook page at the minute. And we've got on the 8th of April, we've got a webinar for teachers just to talk about some of those pedagogical elements as well. So I think the next thing I'd like to talk about is to invite Jennifer Raven from Sound Connections. Jennifer worked with Surrey and with some of our other partner hubs in the last 18 months to talk to them about how they were using synchronous online learning to reach pupils in particularly challenging circumstances, which included those who were isolated rurally or for other reasons. Now, all of our children are isolated now, so I think some of the findings that Jennifer came up with in terms of how online learning could really reach and help those young people will be really helpful. So over to you, Jen, and then we'll go to questions.
Great, thanks, Emily. How much time would you like me to stick to?
It's 2 o'clock. We said we'd finish at 2:30. So should we say 10 minutes and then go to questions?
Yeah, I think that should be fine. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so as Emily was just describing, the Connect Resound new contexts work that I was the external evaluator for was really action research, looking at the potential benefits for children in challenging circumstances. And that feels like something that's particularly important now, as there's an even greater risk that the most vulnerable young people slip through the net and physically can't be reached whilst the pandemic is restricting movement. And I think whilst it can definitely feel very overwhelming having to quickly set up new systems and platforms, and it can feel like the most important thing is the immediate need just to get something or anything going. There's a real opportunity to build the needs and circumstances of all young people into planning. And that means that there's really huge potential for online learning becoming a sustainable and embedded part of a hub's long-term offer. So really taking that long view on what's possible. So I'm just going to touch on some of the things that we learnt through the evaluation. And there are two things that I'll do. So firstly, looking at the outcomes and the impact of the programme, and then also just finish with some of the very practical recommendations that came through from teachers about teaching and building relationships with students online, really. So new contexts happened across 4 hubs: Surrey, Croydon, East Sussex and Somerset, and the circumstances of the young people involved included rural isolation, people attending PRUs, unaccompanied asylum seekers learning in an FE college, which Jim talked about, children in care, and also young people with profound anxiety issues. So starting with outcomes and impact, I think for getting people on board, both teachers and parents and carers, bringing it back to what the outcomes are is really important, whether that's about musical learning and progression or personal and social outcomes. And I think it also helps with making the case that you can still create a really high quality, impactful offer online. I've heard of a few people saying that they perhaps want to pay less because it feels like a lesser offer. So some of these things have already been described, but I'll just highlight a few that came through really strongly in the evidence that we gathered. Teachers noticed much higher levels of focus and concentration, and they also observed that students became much more independent in their learning. Then, because online learning uses a medium that many young people feel very comfortable and familiar with, and lessons were happening in a space that felt familiar to them, some psychological barriers to participation were removed. And there was also a really nice example that with some of the asylum seekers, they were really used to using things like Skype to speak to friends and family in other countries. And so their experience of learning online mirrored that and gave them a sense of comfort and connection. The digital element placed a natural distance between teachers and students, which for some vulnerable young people created a safer and more comfortable space. And then NIMAS also worked with some autistic participants who asked specifically for online involvement, either because they physically couldn't get to a venue or were really nervous about meeting people in person for the first time. And linked to that, there's some evidence that online learning enables young people with anxiety to engage with activities, as it removes that pressure of being in a social situation. I think one of the other really important things to think about is the consistency and continuity that it can provide for young people if they're transitioning between places. So that might be moving from school to school, or for children in care, moving between different homes. And then I think this is something that Julia mentioned earlier, but with safeguarding online feeling like a big challenge, and for some people that challenge feels so great that it's stopping them or delaying moving online, there's a real positive side to that. So there's an opportunity to help young people learn about staying safe online. I also wanted to touch on outcomes for teachers. I think at the moment, teachers understandably just really want to find a way to keep on working and providing education for their students. But just thinking longer term about the benefits, people reported having much greater flexibility in their day, that lessons weren't cancelled because of weather conditions. It also gave them a new sort of reflective space to really consider their practice, and they felt that that was having a direct impact on the quality of their teaching. And it was also helping people to work further afield and expand their teaching portfolio and venture into new fields and areas of expertise. So that's a little bit on outcomes. And then the last thing is just some of the practical considerations. And there's so much more about this on the NIMAS website, and much more that will be being shared in future online sessions. But here are some of the things that came through strongly for us. So lesson length was a big consideration. Students found that 20 minutes was the maximum time that they felt able to focus for, but then teachers weren't finding that quite long enough to cover all material. And teachers also found it really tiring to begin with, so factoring in enough break time was something that they asked for and prioritised in their own timetabling. Having an adult in the room at the child's end, at least for the first few sessions, is recommended. We definitely found that this approach requires a really flexible mindset and attitude, and so a willingness to learn through trial and error is really important, and staying very reflective and being part of a community of practice where you can share and troubleshoot collectively. And as I'm sure lots of you are already experiencing, it does require a different teaching style and a different pedagogy, and that can really change from instrument to instrument. And again, this is something that there's more detailed information about on the NIMAS website, but some of the key things that came up were making music the main language of lessons with as little talking as possible is more important than ever. Mirroring, so things like demonstrating fingering is really challenging, so how you do that needs a different sort of thought. Very clear verbal instructions supported by clear body language is needed, and visual aids enhance that. Latency can mean that playing together doesn't tend to work, so teachers are finding that more call and response, imitation and use of backing tracks have been some of the best solutions. And there are also some really interesting things about the teaching environment that you create. So avoiding wearing clothes with busy patterns on them that can be really distracting, and also setting up in a place where there's unlikely to be any movement happening behind you. So that's a real whistle-stop tour of some of the highlights from the evaluation that I think are still relevant for now, but also help us think into the future when things have hopefully settled down a bit. And I think on an evaluation front, there's a really great opportunity for us to collectively gather evidence during this time, really make the case for online learning and think about impact and quality.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I think that's a really good point, actually, that this does give us an opportunity to gather a lot more information from a lot more people about how online learning works in the particular current circumstances. So we will certainly be working as a collective to do that, and to make sure that we gather and share as much learning between us and with you all as possible. And on that, I'd just like to sort of reiterate that we very much sort of see today as the beginning of a conversation with the wider sector. We've never spoken directly with as many hubs in one virtual room before as we have today, although I've met many of you at conferences and networking sessions, and hopefully you've seen some of our resources in the past. But we really want to hear from you about kind of what it is that you need next in order to kind of support you as you take this work forward. How can we help people to connect with one another? Is that what would be most useful? Are there specific guidances, specific sort of areas that you would really like to explore further and have more information on? And I think that's sort of starting to come through in the questions. Still a lot of questions about safeguarding, and I can just see one about how important is it to record sessions, and I've heard examples of both. I think the key thing around safeguarding and recording and data protection is that it needs to be done in the context of your organisation. So it's really something that's about about you will already have existing sort of safeguarding procedures and policies in place, and it's about kind of slotting the online learning into that and reflecting how you as an organisation sort of address that. I think the first thing to do is to look at our safeguarding guidance, and also that colleagues have very generously agreed to share, and look at the sort of questions in our safeguarding guidance. We have a series of sort of questions to go through where you're making these decisions about whether or not to record and how to store and all of those sorts of things. So we've got some questions coming through. What Zoom packages are people using? Are you all buying into the education ones? So that's probably a question for our hubs. I'll just unmute you all. It sounds like Zoom have been quite helpful in actually sort of talking to hubs and local authorities directly about their packages, from what you've said.
Would you like me to hop in there, Emily?
That'd be great, Julia. Yeah.
So yes, we started off initially with the education package because it has that recording function, which when we were working with our safeguarding team in the council, that was definitely one of the basic principles that we were asked to comply with. And I think Zoom Help is brilliant, actually. The chat, the online chat is clearly being overwhelmed. You know, if you go on there, you're normally about 121th in the queue, but despite that, they get back to you really well. And now we're at the level of 60 users. We have a dedicated person who's also extremely helpful for adjustments and things. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. So yeah, and it sounds like some are using the same package there.
I can just add to that briefly, Emily, if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Just
Thank you.
Say, yeah, we secured Jim secured a half-hour meeting last week with our relationship manager. He was extremely helpful, and he said, yeah, he would definitely be giving us the support he could in the context of being very busy. So
great. Yeah. So another safeguarding and GDPR question. How do you deal with GDPR recording if you have a group session and one parent asks for data to be deleted, then another raises a safeguarding question? Oh, we've got some we've got some scenario questions here. Thanks, Steve. I mean, I suppose it depends on where there's sort of, that's a good point, where the data is being stored. You're going to have to agree with people, and people are going to have to stand by the agreement that they sign up to in the first instance. I guess from that, you can't really get over that sort of, if people have signed a GDPR disclaimer saying that you're allowed to store the video, then you are allowed to store the video. That doesn't mean you're allowed to share it, but I guess you would still be legally allowed to store it. I'm not a legal expert. Maybe we need a GDPR expert in a future session as well about some of this. We've got a question which is certainly pertinent to the current situation, which I don't know if people in the panel will have specific responses to. It might be that people in the chat do. Just comparing notes on furloughing. So some people have been asked to put their staff on leave, and other people's staff are still working, and maybe doing some online or creating some resources. And there does seem to be a mixed response across the sector.
I know. Look, I can jump in on that for a minute.
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan.
I mean, there was a comment earlier in the chat about it as well. There's a link to the government guidance, but as far as I understand it, if you furlough an employee, they're not then able to come and do work for you or volunteer as part of the service provision that you're offering. So they wouldn't be able to come back to you and do work for you if you are getting that 80% payment from the government to kind of put them on hold for that 3 months or whatever it is. So I think, you know, that is quite clear. So there is a link that Steve has put into the chat there at 146 that provides the direct quote, and that was pretty much how I thought about it before this meeting as well. So I think I would be very cautious about accessing that potential funding for your employees and then asking them to come and volunteer for you. I think you will find yourself losing that money if that's the case.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's really helpful. Just to say as well, we will be sharing the video with you all afterwards, those of you who weren't able to stay or who joined late. We won't share the chat, but we will pull out sort of pertinent links and things like that. So the chat is Chatham House rules, but we'll be sharing the video with delegates afterwards. Thank you. Just looking to see if we've got any more questions that have come in. We've got about 10 more minutes. I'm just going to pick up some of the things that Jennifer said that I thought were really useful and that I've heard a lot. One about that lesson length factor and that sort of the exhaustion that teachers find when they're first delivering teaching. And I think that's a really useful thing for hub managers to kind of be aware of when people are starting off in that, because that's certainly something we've heard a lot. And yeah, secondly, just the question about reflective practice and actually teachers starting to do something in a different way and hubs starting to do something in a different way has had a sort of rolling effect of actually generating quite a lot of innovation and more reflective practice for a lot of hubs. So that's just an interesting finding for us all to just keep an eye on, really. Yeah, that's interesting. So we've just had theory sessions are working really well online. That's a really good point. I can imagine that focus is really useful when you've got a small group of young people kind of in a virtual room, perhaps instead of in a real one, and maybe a bit less sort of potential for going off topic than if they were all in a shared physical space. So that's a really good point. Just a quick show of hands. I know we've had a little bit of chat about group lessons and one-to-many teaching. And I don't know if people would find a session particularly on how online can be useful for that helpful. Please say yes if you would, and we'll try and set that up. Or if you have any other ideas that you want to share with us at the moment that you would find. Yep, okay, that's 2 yeses. That's a good sign. We'll try and set that up. Brilliant. Good stuff. Oh, and people are trialing group teaching already, so we might come back to you and ask you to help us out with a session on that. Brilliant, thank you. So the next sessions we've got coming up, as I said, we've got one on the 8th of April for teachers, to which hub managers who are often also, or almost invariably also teachers as well, are very welcome to come into, and might help you to support your staff and help you to deliver as well. A session next week on the hardware and technology side. And if it would be useful to sort of continue kind of hub managers check-ins about that, that's something we could facilitate as well. So please don't feel you've got to come up with the answers now, but let us know if there's anything that you would find particularly helpful. I'm not seeing any more questions coming through, so I'll just give you all a last chance to type in any
Emily, well, can I mention one other thing while we're here?
Yeah.
I'm just going to try and put a link into the chat. Yeah, I mean, I know as well as you do that there are a lot of small businesses working in the arts sector that are really struggling at the moment. And I've spoken to a few other leaders of small businesses who have been unaware of some of the government support that's available. And I wanted to just raise this one for you, just in case there's anyone who's listening who's either has a small business or knows of people that have small businesses that rent a business property. You have to, in order to claim this, you have to have a business property, and the rateable value of it has to be less than £12,000. And if that's the case, you would almost certainly be getting small business rate relief. And that's the key thing. If you get small business rate relief, you don't pay any business rates under £12,000. And that's the government's normal support for small businesses. So in our situation, you know, we rent a floor of a mill in near Sandbach here. Our rates are just under £2,000 a year, but we get complete exemption from that from Cheshire East Local Authority. And that's pretty much the case for anyone with a rateable property of £12,000 or less. Now, what the government have said is that you're not going to benefit from some of the business rates exemptions moving forwards. So they are going to give those businesses a cash injection. So it's not a loan, it's a gift, if you like, from the government to help you over the next few months. And that gift is £10,000, which is a lot of money for a small business. And it could make a big difference to many small businesses. So here in Cheshire East, for instance, you know, they on their website, for their business rates part of their website, they have just put a form that you have to fill in, and you have to give them your account number, because of course we've never paid Cheshire East any money in terms of business rates. So you have to give them your bank details, and there's an expectation that at the beginning of April, this money from the government will be coming to small businesses. So just something to alert people to that. And if you know anyone who's running small business, that has a business property that they're getting that small business rate relief on, then they will be able to claim that £10,000 through their local authority to help them over the next few months.
Thank you, Jonathan. I can imagine that could apply to lots of partners within the strategic hubs,
course,
if not the lead services. So
yeah, it's not so much.
Really
I'm thinking of musicians who might,
and
you know.
Thank you all, everybody, for.
It's fine. You carry on.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just thinking there are so many musicians and artists who you know have constituted themselves as, you know, businesses over the years and may have commercial premises, and if that's the case, then this is targeted funding for those people.
Definitely keep some of those remote learning studios alive. Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, thank you everybody who's joined today. It's been really fantastic to have so many people in here. Thank you especially to all of the contributors. It's just been wonderful, and I know you've all had exceptionally busy weeks and had a lot to do in a very short period of time, and I'm really grateful to you all for giving up your time to talking to all of the people that we've had in the room this afternoon and sharing your experiences. There's lots and lots of learning, and as I say, please do go to connectresound.org.uk/resources. We've got lots and lots of free resources there that pick up a lot of the points that people have been talking about. And we are also advertising the training that we are putting online as fast as we can and in response to what people tell us you need. So please let us know what it is that you need and what it is that's going to help you get through the next few weeks. So we will share with permission people's contact details that they've put in the chat so that people can keep in touch afterwards. As I said, we won't share the entire chat, but we will send you a recording of this meeting in case you missed any of it. And we will also hope, Jonathan, that your household produces some Wimbledon stars of the future, because we can see a lovely tennis match going on behind you. So I will let you all go
family
now.
badminton. Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you, Emily. See you soon.
See you soon. And hopefully spend a little bit of time either this afternoon or at the weekend in the fresh air, because I know that every single one of you will have been working non-stop all week, even more than a Music Hub manager normally does. So thanks ever so much, and we'll see you all at another Zoom meeting very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.